Thank you, Roger.
Okay.
Thank you. Glad to see everybody here. The promotion for this is actually just a little bit incorrect. It said the history of the Wadsworth Police Department, and it's really the history of Wadsworth law enforcement. And there is a difference. Because before there was a Wadsworth Police Department, there were township constables and village marshals. On April the 6th, 1818, just 4 years after Wadsworth was settled, George Lyman and William Richards were duly elected as the first Wadsworth Township constables. So next year, on April the 6th, 2018, Wadsworth will have law enforcement for 200 years. And I think Roger's got a parade and a festival lined up for that. No? Oh. Wadsworth was incorporated as a village in 1866, and as a village, law enforcement went from township constable to village marshal. This is James Durling. On April 24th, 1866, he was appointed as the first town marshal. He resigned July 5th, 1866. I don't know why, and was replaced by D.D. Holben. In an ordinance passed in 1883, the town marshal was to receive a salary of $10 per annum, and he was also required to post a bond of $500 prior to entering into his official duties, which may have had something to do with James Durling resigning in a couple of months. This is Marshal Andrew Harrington, and he served from the late 1800s in that time frame. This is Deputy Marshal Henry Bricker, who also served during the 1800s. And if anyone knows the location of that hat, I'd like to know where that hat's at, because I'd like to get my hands on that hat. There were no less than 26 other men who served as marshals or deputy marshals prior to 1900. Up until 1867, when the first town hall was built, the constables and marshals worked out of their homes. The first town hall, shown here on the right, was built on High Street near Maple in the area of the current Huntington Bank. And this is a later view of the first town hall. Then it starts to get good. In 1911, the legend begins. Tommy Lucas is elected town marshal. His monthly salary is $30, and he patrols on his bicycle. But he's most fondly remembered as being around town patrolling on his beloved Harley Davidson. In 1915, the town hall was abandoned, and the marshal's offices moved into the basement of this Broad Street building, the basement of the Smith Cleaners, on Broad Street between Lyman and High on the north side, which is roughly right here in the library parking lot area, right out here. The Lucas family tells a story in 1929 of when Tommy stopped a speeder coming through town. As he approached the car, he recognized the driver as the famous jazz musician and band leader Jimmy Durante. Mr. Durante was going pretty quick through town, got stopped, and being a music lover, Marshal Lucas gave Mr. Durante his choice: pay the fine for speeding or follow him home and play his piano for him. And on that day, the man who would later become a big-time television and movie celebrity played the piano for Marshal Lucas here in town. January 1st, 1931, Wadsworth became a city, and then the marshal's office then became a city police department, and Tommy was the first chief. On July 22nd, 1934, public enemy number one, John Dillinger, is killed by federal FBI or Federal Bureau of Investigation agents outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. The man who was then public enemy number 2 was elevated to public enemy number 1, and that's Alvin Karpus. Alvin Karpus was a car thief, a kidnapper, safecracker, burglar, and the brains behind the Ma Barker gang. And on January 23rd, 1935, public enemy number 1 came to Wadsworth. More precisely, he came through Wadsworth. He wrote a book, and in his book he talks about coming to Wadsworth. The entire, I'm going to read you the entire 2 paragraphs because it is kind of interesting. They had kidnapped, Karpus and his associate had kidnapped a doctor in Pennsylvania. And it's interesting, the reason they kidnapped a doctor is because apparently at that time doctors had emblems on their license plates. And they could be traveling all over any time, day or night, and not get stopped because of speeding, because they figured they're going to an emergency. So they loved having the doctor's car. And Karpus writes, his radio had been broken when we took over the car, and we hadn't heard any news all day. But Harry fiddled with the thing and made it work. Lowell Thomas came on. The entire eastern seaboard, he announced, was barricaded against 2 desperate gunmen who had shot their way out of Atlantic City. Thomas gave our names, descriptions, and backgrounds, and all of a sudden, our friendly doctor was anxious to leave us. We pulled into a town called Wadsworth and pushed Dr. Hunsberger into the town hall, which was empty. He was terrified, sure that we were going to shoot him. We dragged him into the basement and tied him up next to the furnace, where he'd be warm until someone found him. We put a gag around his mouth, and I stuffed a $50 bill in his breast pocket to pay his way home. Then Harry and I took off for Toledo in the doctor's car. So he's kind of a gentleman. He paid his way home anyhow. But there's a picture of Tommy with Dr. Karpus's with Alvin Karpus's kidnap victim, Dr. Horace Hunsberger. Another picture from this series shows Tommy coming out of the building, and the building is obviously the old Grange Hall on Greenwich Road out in Seville. Or Guilford, yeah. In 1936, City Hall was built on High Street with the jail in the basement and police administrations on the ground floor there. Also in 1936, the department got their first uniforms. And front row there, left to right, is Safety Director Joe Neath, Chief Tommy Lucas, Patrolman Edgar Hamilton, and Mayor H.J. Hall. Second row, left to right, was Patrolman Harv Weldy, Patrolman Ed Transu, and Patrolman Harold Walls. And there's another photo of the members of the department taken in 1937. This year, the department gets their first patrol car, but of course, Tommy preferred his motorcycle. And in 1938, the police department would grow to 3 full-time officers and 1 substitute. This is a photo of Tommy's badge, which is currently in the possession of David Lucas in Indiana. And about every 2 years, David expects a phone call from me trying to get that badge, and I try to buy it, and he refuses to sell it, and it's just basically got to the point where he knows I'm going to be calling, and I know he's going to say no. But every 2 years, we have a nice conversation, but it's tucked away with the family. And there's a picture of Tommy with his success for Rod Lonier, who was chief from 46 to 71. This is Winnie Dakin. She was an operator with the Star Telephone Company, which was located on the 2nd floor of what is now Ann's Bakery. She could be considered the first Wadsworth dispatcher, because the way they did it back then, if you wanted the police, you called the phone company, and the operator would flip a switch. And I've heard 2 different things, that there was 1 red light on the Citizens Bank building on the square, and that there was actually 3 red lights, one on the Citizens Bank, one at the south end of town near the railroad crossing, and one up on Highland Avenue. But those lights would go on, and when the officer on patrol excuse me, saw the red light, he would go to a phone, call the operator, get the details of who needed the police, and then he would go. So response times could have been a little bit long back then. Around 1950, radios were put in the patrol cars, and for a while the officers were dispatched using both the radio and the red light system because the radios wouldn't work in some parts of the city. The officers were dispatched by the police radio operators, the dispatchers in the police department, from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m., and between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. they were dispatched through the phone company using the red light system. By mid-year, the department was forced to go with 24-hour dispatching on their own when the Northern Ohio Telephone Company informed the city that they'd no longer be doing any of the police or fire dispatching services. This is the department in 1952, and officers left to right, kind of going around the table, are Harlan Benier, Charlie Cole, Bob Weldy, Harv Weldy, Rod Lonier, Don D'Alessandro, Bernie Ty, and George Capion. Radio operators left to right are Imogene Cassidy, Pearl Chamberlain, Nellie Leatherman, and Winnie Dakin. And then they got high tech. And that's the radio operator Nellie Leatherman and Rod Lonier sometime in the 50s. There's another picture of the department in the early 50s in front of City Hall. During the 1950s, Patrolman Bernie Ty designed the first shoulder patch for the department, the small W patch. And during Tommy's tenure, he had a booth constructed at the west end of Broad Street Park where officers could monitor traffic. And this picture is Patrolman Bob White, and this guy here is sitting right there, Ed Otanikar. This was a patrol car in the early 60s. By 1962, the uniform shirts had changed to two-tone. The shirt was light blue with dark blue or navy pocket flaps and epaulets. And that young guy right there is my uncle Charles Bluebaugh, whose grandson Andrew is serving on the department today. Wadsworth officers have always been known to be a bunch of good shots. And here's Jerry Atnip and Carl Godsey in the 70s showing off their trophy and winning target from competition. John Moore and Mike Antro, they were anchors on the pistol team. And there's another picture of the two-tone shirts. Probably a better picture. In September of 1974, Patrolman John Moore represented Wadsworth PD at the National Police Combat Pistol Matches in Jackson, Mississippi. And having been a police firearms instructor, this picture just scares me to death because you never put your finger on the trigger. But that's a good picture of John. It was done for the news banner. And this was the patch worn by the Wadsworth Police Combat Pistol Team. After the retirement of Chief Lonier, Bernie Ty was named as the third chief of the department in 1971. By 1974, the department was still growing. Front row left to right are Sergeants Dick Trowbridge, Fred Deem, Bob Weldy, Charlie Cole, and Carl Godsey. Second row is Chief Ty, dispatchers Nancy Bell, Pauline France, Jan Holsinger, Pat Bordak, Secretary Jan Steele, and meter maid Kathy Smith, who made lots of friends in town. The third row is Don Hartman, John Moore, John Champo, and a young Dave Burrow who's in the back row. The back row in the picture is Mike Antro, Wendell Brink, George Burza, and Mark Anderson. And missing from the photo is Art Smith, Mike King, and John Gehring. This is a patrol car from the early 70s. Is that you in there, Dave? Yeah. That's what I thought. Wadsworth Dispatch in 1975, that's Nancy Bell and her electric typewriter. No computer. By 1975, the uniform shirts had changed back to the solid navy blue color. And this is 78. I'm looking to see if, Bobby, what year did you start, Bob? 84. Oh, well, that's why you're not in there then. In the late 70s, Wadsworth added a van or a paddy wagon to their fleet. And this is a late 70s patrol car. Then in the early 80s, the little W patch was enlarged. In 1980, Chief Ty retired, and Sergeant Mike King was sworn in as the 4th Chief of Police. This is a photo of Patrolman Mike King. And sometime during Chief King's tenure, between 81 and 86, the badge style was changed. The overall design of the badge stayed the same, but in the center they used to have their unit numbers, and instead they switched to the state seal. And that's the badge that they still wore today. In 89, Sergeant Dave Singleton was named as lieutenant, and this was only the second time that a lieutenant's position had been established in the department. The first was in 1966 when Ed Thorndike had the position. And since that time, Rob Wyrick and presently Dave Dorland have also held the rank of lieutenant. Then when the current City Hall was constructed in 94 on High at Maple, the police department moved in there. And they take a little bit of each floor. This is the department in 2000. Let's see. Right there, Bob. There's Bob. This was dispatch in 2000. That's Claudia Twining and Matt Neal. And dispatch can be a very busy place. Wadsworth is lucky that they have their own dispatch and smart enough to have at least a couple dispatchers on duty at a time, because that place can go crazy sometimes. This was Wadsworth PD's first tactical unit truck, a refurbished Wadsworth Fire Department truck in 2000. In 2002, when Chief Mike King retired, Lieutenant Dave Singleton was promoted to chief. He's shown here as a sergeant. Chief Singleton would serve until 2009, and he was only the second member of the department, along with Chief Rod Lonier, to graduate from the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Chief Lonier graduated from the 35th session in 1947, and Lieutenant Singleton from the 180th session in 1995. There's a patrol car from roughly around 2000 and the graphics that they used then. Here's the department in 2005. And then when Ford stopped producing the Crown Vics, Wadsworth, like many other departments, switched to the Dodge Chargers. And in doing so, also changed the graphics on the side of the cars. And they went back to the old black and white paint schemes. The color police cars ought to be, in my opinion. In 2010, Wadsworth SWAT team obtained an out-of-service ambulance from Wadsworth EMS and turned it into their SWAT vehicle, replacing the old fire truck. After the retirement of Chief Singleton, Sergeant Randy Renke became the city's 6th and current chief. Randy's been with the department since 1992 and was promoted to sergeant in 2000 and chief in 2010. In 2014, Wadsworth again switched vehicle styles, or they're in the process slowly of switching them over, from the Dodge Chargers to the Ford SUVs. And the reason, I would assume, is the same as any department, including the one I worked for: room. There was absolutely no room in those Dodge Chargers for anything, and you have more equipment, and no room to put it all. So basically, they just went for the room. In 2014, during the city bicentennial, the W shoulder patch was replaced with the patch worn today. And excuse me. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy. And if I can't answer them, well, maybe one of these three guys can. Oh. Oh. In 1914, Henry Bachman and Wesley Bixler, motorcycle riders, were caught by Marshal Lucas on Monday while speeding on Broad Street. Mayor Boyer sentenced them to do traffic police duty under the marshal's direction for 10 days.
Any questions that you have for our speaker? Ask now.
This isn't a question, it's a comment. During the late 30s, early 40s, my father was deputy sheriff of Western Star. And
We need to talk.
I remember, well, I wasn't very old because we only lived there till I was 5. But I remember him in his uniform. We have pictures of him in his uniform. And
Was his first name Harold?
Hmm?
Was his first name Harold?
No, it was Albert.
Okay.
Albert Corkery. And I had a little shadow box with all his badges in and gave it to one of my kids. I don't have it anymore. I would have brought it, but that was a swinging place because that corner where the chicken place used to be was a big dance hall.
Mm.
And he was on duty on the weekends at dance hall.
Oh.
I remember that. The big city of Western Star.
Yep.
I think I read one article about Marshall Ricker, and he also took care of the stray dogs and cats in town. And how much did he get for every dog that he picked up? Was like $1.50 or something. So he was, to get extra money, he would go out and gather up all the neighbors' dogs, I guess. The sad part is, they met a pretty tragic end in that he threw them in incinerators to get rid of them, and he had trouble with that. And supposedly he had his own police record.
I had heard that.
And I don't know what he got in trouble for, but he was a marshal.
Dog.
And it could have been related to that dog.
Animal cruelty or something.
Yes, animal cruelty.
That's before they do that.
But he was also the one that was on site with the Orly murder.
Yeah.
So that's a whole story in itself.
Yes.
That's a few books.
Yeah, that's 2 books.
Some good books on it.
We'll have to get her in sometime. So, any questions about the history of the law enforcement, the police department?
I just have another comment. When I was in high school in the 50s, the police force was small, and they were always around town. And they were always, so everybody, all the school kids, and the older school kids knew all the policemen. I mean, we knew them all by name, because they probably weren't from town. I just remember every one of those guys.
Was this before or after Walmart? Yeah, we quadrupled the police department when we went to Walmart.
Yeah. Well, they currently have, I have their breakdown. One chief, 1 lieutenant, 5 sergeants, 23 officers. But the breakdown of the officers is 1 is on military leave, 1's assigned to the schools as the SRO, 1 assigned to the Mennonite County Drug Task Force, 3 assigned to the Detective Bureau, and 17 assigned to patrol. And they have 8 dispatchers, 3 auxiliary officers, and 1 secretary records clerk. That's the current breakdown.
And the one statistic we came across was, I think it said in 1937, they would pick up the hobos along the railroad tracks and haul them into the police department and send them to the basement. So 36 or 37, so it could have been the old, it could have been the new, whatever, but they said the basement was just a cement floor, and they would make them sleep on the floor for the night for vagrancy or whatever. But they said some of them visited them 2-3 times a year when they were coming through, and they would feed them some basic food and send them on their way. But, so anyway, they set a record that year of having over 1,200 of them during that 1 year. So that was kind of a popular thing back in Depression days.
Do they still have a jail at City Hall?
Yes.
How many cells?
I'm not going.
Been there.
4?
I think.
Yeah. 3 or 4, I think.
Upstairs.
It's just a holding facility. They no longer serve time there.
Well, they're not 5 days anymore, they're just 8 hours?
Yeah, just an 8-hour facility.
8 hours, yeah. And the reason they break that down is the state has regulations of size-wise and everything, and you can be a temporary holding facility for 8 hours, and then you can be a 5-day, or you can be a full service, and it just depends on the facility and how much money you want to dump into it.
Excuse me. Another question. On this little episode last week with the guy digging the court.
Oh, yeah.
What do they do with him when they finally catch him? Does he go in one of the cells, or does he go up to the guy?
Well, he was in the hospital for a while. When he crashed his car, he got hurt. And from there, I guess I read in the Gazette, he went to the Medina County. So for not wanting to go to jail, he's yeah.
In 1956, I got arrested. I got 2 traffic tickets in the same day with my old Oldsmobile, and I went before Don Merriman. And he was the mayor at that time. You never mentioned much about the mayors of Wadsworth, but
No.
we didn't have a municipal court then. The mayor saw all the misdemeanors, and he threatened to throw me in jail for 3 days, but he finally gave me some leniency, so I had to pay a nice fine, but that was in the days when I was kind of a rough kid, so.
Did it straighten you out?
Straighten me out, right, yes.
I remember after the mayor, we had Judge Ott for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, I went over here.
I lived 2 doors from Charles Bob in the 60s, and one night I was upstairs,
Oh.
looked out my back window, and there are police on my back sidewalk with rifles, and apparently he'd been threatened.
Oh.
Somebody threatened or something. And there was, I could see him down Lucas Court. It was like, oh, okay. And that was the 60s. Now today it would be every day.
Might want to mention your book, if it's still available or not, the book you wrote,
I don't think it is.
it's not available anymore?
No. I gave all those to Wadsworth FOP, and I think that they sold them all. And,
They have copies here in the library, in the history room.
yeah.
That you can't check out, you can at least read them here.
Oh, there's one there, yeah.
Yeah.
I drove a friend of mine home from work for one day, and she lives on Lucas Court. And she said something about,
The wall.
that there's something about the wall in front of her house that when he was,
Rumor has it that when, that when Tommy built that wall, that they had a bunch of confiscated guns that needed to be destroyed. So rather than use up a lot of cement, he mixed them in with the cement, and there was guns in that wall. They're destroyed.
I have an incident to talk about here. Back in about 56 to 58, hard welding, summertime. I wasn't involved. I'm gonna tell you right now.
I'd like to have $1 for every time I've heard
I know
that.
who was.
I know who's talking.
And they're in the ground, and the officers are going. Hart Welding was driving around town. It was hot. The window was down. He was smoking his cigar. Up in the tree, there are 6 individuals by the gazebo with squirt guns. It was not raining. But he squirted on his windshield, and he turned the wiper on. Then he went around the square again and turned the wipers off. Then he come back around again. And they squirted him, he turned the wipers on. And then, after that, the next week, these individuals took cherry bombs and a cigarette and placed them at each corner of the square. And Charlie was at the gazebo. And then, boom, 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 boom! He didn't know where to go. All the guys are in the square with their cars. I wasn't involved. I was 12 years old. I wouldn't have done that.
I thought, how come you know so much?
I know who did it. And I'm not telling who did it. He's dead, right? You know who did it.
Any other questions for the speaker? If not, I'm sure he's gonna hang around for a few minutes afterwards and you can
Oh, yes, we
share
have
stories. But anyway, thank you very much.